supply chain takeaways from last week in Davos, combating missed LTL pickups, and trends in the trucking space. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories, as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by Werner. In the automotive world, similar to many industries, speed is everything. Werner provides the engineered multimodal solutions to keep your business moving. From bulk hauls to nightly parts delivery, Werner's flexible fleet scales to meet the demands of any shop or retail store. Get reliable and safe precision from a supply chain partner who understands your unique needs. Become a customer today at choosewerner.com. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, the annual World Economic Forum was held last week in Davos, Switzerland. This year it was more politicized than normal, especially with more than 60 heads of state. But while the politicians stole the spotlight, the primary purpose of the meeting each year is to bring business leaders together to talk about how to improve business operations. I talked earlier this week with one of the attendees and speakers at the conference about his impressions and the takeaway from the week, especially as it related to supply chains. Suketu Gandhi is a partner and global chair in the strategic operations practice at management and consulting firm Kearney. Here now is our conversation. Welcome, Suketu. It's great to have you with us today on Logistics Matters.
Excited to be here, David. Sounds like a wonderful conversation we're going to have.
I think so. Thank you again for being our guest, and wanted to ask you about what you were doing in Davos for the week.
Well, the funny part was it was warmer than Chicago, so I was enjoying the beautiful weather. In addition to that, moderating a few panels, attending quite a few sessions, and having conversations with close to about 135 folks.
Now, this year, the World Economic Forum was probably more politicized than normal, especially with some 60 heads of state who were there, lots of intrigue. Before we dive into it, what were your overall impressions of this year's event, and how's that compared to others you've attended?
This year, particularly, leaders came in well prepared. They had been making changes to their business over the last year and a half, 2 years, and we're looking to see what others were doing, what were some good learnings. Now, the political angle is always exciting, right? Great popcorn to chew and watch. But the interesting part was it had a huge element of practicality, which you may or may not associate with Davos if you read the newspapers, but the conversations were absolutely real.
Amongst all the political posturing, did you see much along the efforts of improving businesses and the way they operate?
Absolutely. There were three big areas in which the conversations went. One was around where should we place our manufacturing? Where should we design products? And how do we operate in a world that is constantly changing? So that was idea number one. The second area that got a lot of discussion was this whole concept of operational sovereignty. When I manufacture things in different countries for sale, what do I do with data? What do I do with my AI, with algorithms? For example, if I'm manufacturing and running something in Asia, does the data stay there or does it flow with the product? How do I ensure that I have the ability to control every aspect of it and guarantee to the end customer that there is a pristine ability for products to be created and the information with it to flow? That was a lot of discussion. And the third was, of course, right, the big elephant in the room or on the mountains was AI. This year, the conversation on AI was, hey, what does it take to scale? As I wrote in one of the LinkedIn posts, that pilots are great for planes, but AI should scale. And that was very important element of how the conversations went.
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, as you mentioned, a lot of the week was overshadowed by the politics involved. Of course, the U.S. policy and the president's comments were front and center. A lot of what we heard concerning Greenland and tariffs. How did that impact the business aspects of what you were participating at with the forum?
So, as you know, the forum runs from Monday through Friday. Monday and Tuesday were really hardcore conversations around how to operate businesses and what is the implication of government and politics on that. Wednesday was dominated by the US president and his comments. It took half a day away, and folks came out of that by the end of the day a little bit relieved. Based on the statements made. And then Thursday, it was back to business, and Friday was a little bit lighter this year, as always is. And the conversations had completely shifted back to what do I do for my business, for my people, and have a conversation of how do I collaborate with either businesses or colleagues across the globe.
That's good. They were able to shift and to actually go into the importance of the conference, being there and learning about how to better businesses. You, of course, were dealing with business leaders from all over the world. Did you see any common ground there among those leaders who were attending?
Yeah, the common ground was what do I do around growth, which is interesting. They recognize that costs are going up. They recognize that resiliency is table stakes. But what do I do around growth? And there was a lot of conversation around growth. So that was one powerful element. The second thing was narrative and leadership. How do we communicate with colleagues, team members, associates within companies so they can get some clarity in an environment where things are not really clear? And the last thing that was a bit different was different regions were behaving or asking questions a bit differently. So the US was about, hey, how does exceptionalism continue? This in Europe, it was around what do we do so that the Draghi report can be fully implemented, for example, or hurdles are removed in either starting new businesses or scaling up. And in Asia, there was just a palpable sense of excitement that as the world continues to turn, Asia becomes a significantly important element of global change. So there was a bit of commonality, a bit of difference.
It seems that way. As we talk about supply chains, and let's dig into those a little bit deeper, what discussions did you hear that would affect world trade and the way that international supply chains operate?
The big part in supply chains was around ensuring that you have the critical things you need, whether it's critical minerals. There was a lot of discussion about that. The second thing is around things like memory chips, and ensure that, or AI chips that so you can have access to that. The third was around how do you move between finished goods and partially made goods that are assembled, and what are the complexity that comes as a part of logistics as you move things around. So those kind of three things were fairly common. And then the last thing was around talent, because talent is available universally, but it's not universally the same talent that's available. So how do we ensure that things we need to do globally across regions are available, are easily doable with the talent we have?
You mentioned earlier in our conversation about the impacts of artificial intelligence on business, trade, and commerce. What were some of the significant takeaways from that discussion for you?
The big one in the world of supply chain was around product design. Because now, in the old days, right, you had to go through and create models and run that through before a product came to life. These days, you can go from an idea to a designed product, at least electronically, in 30 minutes or less. So that was really powerful in the world of AI. The second one was around managing risk, but not as a one-off episodic activity. It is risk measured daily, hourly, every minute. So you really understand. And then the third is the true flows of change and understanding of where there could be a breakage and how do you react to it. So it was constantly around sensing and pivoting as you think about change. And these were concepts that came back again and again as you talk to folks who are really running super large corporations.
That's very interesting. Of course, Davos was last week. This week, we see some other news affecting economies and supply chains. See, the report of consumer confidence is down to a low level that it hasn't seen for more than a decade. U.S. Treasuries and the dollar were also down significantly this week. Investors seem a little bit jittery. How will these trends affect investments from overseas companies looking to do more, and particularly in supply chains within the U.S.?
Well, the consumer confidence number is a fascinating one, as you've seen it, David, for a period of time. The confidence is low, but the spending is pretty high.
Yeah, consumers still
Um,
continue to spend. Yes.
that's exactly right. So one of the two is incorrect, or the classic leadership principle is to have two conflicting ideas in the brain at the same time and still be able to function. So I think business leaders are following the money. They're saying, hey, people are still buying. What do we do? The thing around, the dollar is interesting because it has the double impact of, on the one side of tariffs, but also it costs a little more to bring products in. That creates an incentive to have more manufacturing in the US. The last thing around that is, of course, can we get the talent to deliver on that? And as you know, on the one side, we have, fairly low unemployment numbers compared to historical averages, but at the same time, there's a surplus of talent in specific areas and a shortage, especially in the world of supply chain. Manufacturing, we don't have enough talent. So those are kind of some of the things that they're working through. Great demand, cost maybe going up a little bit, and talent is a little bit harder to get to. So I think businesses are really working through that. But at the end of the day, the market demand drives a lot of the thinking, as you know very well, David.
As you mentioned, consumers are still spending. There is incentive to build things and manufacture things in the United States, but you can't do that overnight. And we don't have the talent and ability to do a lot of this. Are we looking ahead at some trouble by not being able to turn things as quickly as maybe some people would like?
So we have talent, just not at the scale we need, right? Our hypothesis is that automation is going to be a big help in terms of scaling up our ability to do that. And we think that that's one of the things around American exceptionalism that you see again and again is our ability to innovate out of situations that may look a little tougher. So that's one part. The second part comes through is although there's tariffs, on an average, right, what's the number, like 12% or something? If you're ready to pay that, then you could get things made at other places and assembled finally over here, or even manufactured at other places to serve the customer here. And then the third thing is really innovative ways of working with your suppliers. We are seeing dramatic innovation in the way companies are working with their suppliers.
While the world is very uncertain, we have learned that supply chains are able to adapt and move forward, and we're seeing that everywhere now.
It is. And I heard a famous CEO make a quote once where he said, if you don't like uncertainty and change, you'll hate extinction. So we'll go for uncertainty and change, David.
I think that makes sense. We've been talking to Suketu Gandhi, partner and global chair in the strategic operations practice at management firm Kearney. Thank you again for being with us today on Logistics Matters.
Thank you, David.
Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Ben, we hear of artificial intelligence being applied to all sorts of supply chain operations these days. And this week you wrote about a practical application in the less than truckload space.
Yeah, this one was interesting for me. You know, Artificial intelligence and lately, particularly agentic artificial intelligence, is one of those buzzwords that's just in the water all around us right now. Agentic, of course, is the current terminology for an AI application that can not only analyze the data in the world around us and also draw conclusions about it, but even act upon those conclusions. So that sounds pretty nifty, but like a lot of leading edge technology, it can often be hard to imagine how this stuff will apply to the nitty gritty daily life of logistics. Well, this week we got a hint about that, or actually, it's a proof point, let's say. This was from a major player in transportation about a specific application. This is C.H. Robinson. That's the Minneapolis-based freight broker and transportation and logistics service provider. And they said that they're using AI agents right now to combat the problem of missed less-than-truckload, or LTL, freight pickups. They say this is an industry-wide problem. And it's something that comes up fairly often, just to give everybody a headache about that, because in LTL, one truck can carry freight from up to 20 different shippers in a load. And with that complex mix, it requires also complex coordination to pick it all up, take it to a terminal, and then recombine it on other trucks with other freight heading in that same direction. So all those steps mean that missed pickups and the costly delays that follow can really ripple through LTL networks when they happen.
Well, that makes sense. And I'm sure keeping all those shipments coordinated is very difficult. And how did AI come to the rescue and help them?
Yeah, so C.H. Robinson said that their AI agents, this latest one, is now tracking down missed pickups and using what they called advanced reasoning to determine how to keep freight moving. So the agents are also collecting and analyzing what CHR said is previously unavailable data that LTL carriers are using to improve their technology, scheduling, operations. And according to the company, the results are already in. 95% of checks on missed LTL pickups have now been automated. And that saves, in C.H. Robinson's organization, more than 300 hours of manual work per day spread across the organization. And also unnecessary return trips to go pick up those missed freight loads have been reduced by 42%. So those are pretty big numbers. In the words of one C.H. Robinson executive, they said a missed pickup isn't just a minor inconvenience. When a truck arrives and the freight or the packaging isn't ready, or the carrier couldn't make it because they got stuck in traffic, it forces another truck to come back the next day. That might not even be the shipper's freight, but it creates a domino effect for other freight that was supposed to get picked up and for all the other trucks down the line. And by the way, this isn't the first agent that the company is using. This one joins a group of, C.H. Robinson said, more than 30 other AI agents. They use those for things like giving LTL price quotes and orders, freight classification, shipment tracking, and proof of delivery.
Well, Ben, those all sound like some very good ways that AI applications are making real differences to improve operations, which is the intent of them.
It is, one of the things that AI is good at, that computers are, is counting, keeping track of a whole lot of arithmetic, but better than humans, people usually agree. And with, 20 loads of different shippers on a truck, you really need a computer's brain in charge.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
And to continue looking at the less than truckload space, Victoria, you took part in the SMC3 Jumpstart Conference this week. What were some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, that's right. I did. And this is an annual LTL industry conference that's held in Atlanta. And this year's event actually took place in conjunction with Winter Storm Fern, which prevented me from being there in person as I'd planned, but I was able to cover it remotely via Zoom. All that practice during the COVID years came in handy. But despite the weather, the event drew more than 500 attendees, which was down from the more than 700 that were registered to attend. But show organizers considered that a success given the record-breaking flight cancellations and widespread power outages the storm brought with it. And to answer your question, it was good to get a sense of the major issues and challenges facing the trucking industry. Key themes across the 3 days were the state of the freight economy, which remains marked by uncertainty, the rise of artificial intelligence, which is being applied broadly in LTL, as we just heard from Ben. Actually, C.H. Robinson was one of the speakers at the event, and they talked about these issues. but also accelerating levels of fraud across the industry. And that, of course, poses risks from both a safety and economic perspective. So those were the three big takeaways.
Yeah, those are very interesting. And I know it's hard to keep up with all the news and events that are affecting businesses these days. What stood out to you among those challenges?
Yeah, well, the AI piece was a common thread, and it really was amazing to see what companies like C.H. Robinson and others are actually doing with it. But other than that, what really stood out was the fraud issue. The conference featured an interview with Derek Bars, who is administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA. And this is the group that regulates trucking in the United States, of course. And safety is their job, protecting the safety of everyone who travels our highways. So Bars talked about how FMCSA and the Trump administration more broadly is working with states and other federal agencies to combat safety problems arising from several issues, including the issuing of non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses, or CDLs, English language proficiency enforcement, and also entry-level driver training programs. And these issues are kind of linked, actually. And these are also issues we've been covering a lot, as has the mainstream media, and that's primarily due to some trucking fatalities that have occurred and gotten a lot of press attention, some really terrible accidents. I'll try and just recap quickly what's happening based on Barr's presentation. With the English language proficiency piece, so proficiency in English has long been a requirement to drive a commercial vehicle. The problem is enforcement. So Barr said FMCSA is working with state agencies and law enforcement to ensure that existing regulations are followed and done so consistently. He said, and I'm quoting, thousands and thousands of drivers have been placed out of service as a result. He didn't give a specific number, but clearly the efforts there are bearing fruit. Regarding non-domiciled CDLs, now these are CDLs that can be granted to non-citizens living in the United States who can work here legally. There are ways that people are getting these licenses fraudulently, and they're working on that. But part of the problem too centers around states issuing licenses to non-citizens for periods of time that exceed their legal status to work in the country. So they may have a visa to work for a year, and yet the state issues them a CDL that's good for years beyond that. Bars said the agency is working with 23 states in particular to review their non-domiciled CDL policies, and that most have stopped issuing these types of licenses during the review period. He also said the agency is working with other states to varying degrees, but it was less clear what's going on in the 27 other states we're talking about. Finally, on the driver training, Bars said FMCSA is focused on rooting out bad actors in training as well through a series of ongoing investigations. And he said the agency has removed 6,800 listings from its training provider registry to date, and that investigations of driver training schools continue. And there's still a lot of work to be done. So for now, there's a combination of efforts occurring, most of which are focused on, as I said, sort of tightening up practices within existing policies. But Bars said as well that new rulemaking may be coming down the line on some of these issues.
Yeah, thank you for your report on all that. Very interesting to see what's going on in the trucking industry today. And while you were forced to be remote on it, it also didn't limit you from remote moderating a panel at the conference. So thank you again for contributing to the industry.
Yes, I did. I spoke with Dave Morris of Armstrong Transport Group, and he was great as well. Talked a lot about AI and fraud.
Right, and I understand he was remote as well. So
he was. We both
kind of
were,
an interesting dynamic for that. Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Suketu Gandhi of Kearney for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder, Logistics Matters is sponsored by Werner. In the automotive world, similar to many industries, speed is everything. Werner provides the engineered multimodal solutions to keep your business moving. From bulk hauls to nightly parts delivery, Werner's flexible fleet scales to meet the demands of any shop or retail store. Get reliable and safe precision from a supply chain partner who understands your unique needs. Become a customer today at choosewerner.com. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.